Okay, so today we are talking about negotiations in the context of countries of origin and countries of destination working towards the signing of a bilateral labor agreement or a memorandum of understanding. And I just wanted to speak very briefly about some of the key things that we need to keep in mind for the purpose of negotiation, both in preparing for negotiations and also in concluding the negotiations, whether it is one session or whether it is multiple sessions that we are engaged in. And there are really four things that we want to talk about. The first is the preparatory stage, and the preparatory stage is both for countries of origin and destination, but particularly for countries of origin, to think about all the issues that they want to discuss during the negotiations process. And that is not just making a list of the issues, but it's also on each of the elements to think about what their preferred outcome is, and if they cannot achieve their preferred outcome, what options it is that they would consider to accept. And this is obviously based on offers made by the country of destination, if you're the country of origin, or the other way around. So preparation is key, and it means we go into the negotiation having a very clear idea of what the issues are, what our preferred outcomes are, and importantly, the minimum that we are willing to accept. So that's stage one, or that's part one of the negotiations process. Part two involves developing an agenda, and it of course follows on from part one, but at the beginning of the negotiations process, as we're either exchanging documents or as we are sitting down for actual negotiations, part two is to agree on an agenda. And that means that all the elements that we've considered on our own needs to be tabled, and all the elements, all the agenda items have to agree to by all the parties. And that's important. It's a fatal mistake to start negotiations without having a clear agenda and an agreed to agenda. Part of the second stage, opening, is also that the parties agree about the rules, they agree about the procedures, they agree about the style of negotiations that they're going to be adopting, and so on. And just within that, in terms of the styles of negotiation, there's sometimes when we want to insist on a particular point and insist on a particular outcome, we refer to that as positional-based bargaining. But there are other times when we want to be a bit more collaborative and we want to consider the needs of both parties. So essentially, that when we prepare the agenda, the joint agenda, we have to think about which issues must we achieve a certain outcome on, or do we want to achieve a certain outcome on, and which issues we are likely to be more flexible. And then of course the bulk of the process, as part three, stage three, is the actual bargaining. And this is where we go through the items one by one. And if we can reach an agreement on an item, that's obviously what we want to achieve. But if it's difficult to reach agreement on an item, then both parties can agree to postpone the discussion of that item and then to move on to the next one. So the value of that is we don't get stuck on one issue and we don't deal with all the agenda items. And the strategy to achieve that is start with the easier things first. And the easier things would be, what are we most likely to agree on without elaborate discussion? So we structure the agenda on what we already agree on, what it is that is easy to agree on, and we keep the difficult items for last. The final stage of the negotiation process, or part four, would be what we call the closing. And the closing is in two parts. For each agenda item, when we finish the discussion, provide a quick summary. This is what we discussed, this is what we agreed to, this is the way forward on this item. And so we do it element by element or item by item, but we also do it for the entire process. If follow-up is required, that's part of the closing discussion, which is we've reached a particular stage, we are now ready to move on to the next stage, and there's an agreement about what the next stage will be. So just very quickly, the four elements, just in point form. First element of negotiations is the preparation stage. Second element is the agenda, creating the agenda, and so the opening of the negotiations process. Third element is the actual bargaining. And again, let me emphasize that we take the issues one by one. We come to an agreement one by one, start with the easy issues, end with the difficult ones. And the final part 4 of the process is to really have the closing and make sure that both parties understand the agreement in exactly the same.